Mia had always known that working in a prison wouldn't be easy. As a prison psychologist, she dealt with a rigid system where the humanity of each inmate seemed to be overlooked. But the day she met Ethan was different. Something inside her broke at that moment. She didn't know why, but when their eyes met, it felt like time had stopped for a brief instant. It was a cold autumn morning in New York, and Mia was about to enter the maximum security yard for the first time. She mentally prepared herself for the constant tension, the low conversations, and the ever-watchful eyes of the guards. She knew that every day she would have to confront the ghosts of a flawed system that imprisoned more than bodies. It imprisoned souls. "Hey, Mia." The voice of Marissa, the head of psychology, interrupted her thoughts. "You've been assigned to Ethan Holloway's case. He's the new inmate. His story is complicated." Mia raised an eyebrow. Ethan Holloway. The name somehow seemed familiar, but she didn't allow herself to dwell on it. Her mission was clear: to help rescue the minds of those lost in a cruel system. The first meeting was scheduled in one of the prison's more distant corridors. Ethan sat, like all the other inmates, in a metal chair with his hands shackled in front of him. His eyes were deep, as if they carried an immense weight, but there was something in them that Mia couldn't quite place. A sense of hope. She wasn't used to seeing that in prisoners. He watched her for a moment before speaking, his voice calm and calculated. "You're the new psychologist, right? Mia?" Mia nodded, sitting at the table carefully. "Yes, I am. How are you feeling today, Ethan? How do you think an innocent man feels when he's wrongfully convicted?" He responded with a bitter smile. "But I'm one of the lucky ones, right? I'm still alive." His words hit her hard. He had been convicted of a crime he swore he didn't commit. Mia knew that many prisoners said the same thing, but there was something in his posture, the way he looked at her, that made her heart question the sincerity of his conviction. She took a deep breath. "I want to help you, Ethan, but I need you to be honest with me. Tell me what happened. What really happened?" Ethan remained silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on her. He was weighing his words, as if looking for some sign of understanding. "I've told the police everything I needed to say, and nothing changed. Nothing will change. But I'll tell you anyway." From that moment, Mia knew that the journey she was about to start with Ethan would be more than just a simple psychological investigation. It was something deeper, something that somehow touched her heart. As the weeks went by, Mia began to dedicate herself more intensely to Ethan Holloway's case. She reviewed the reports, the testimonies, and the evidence. What seemed like a clear case of a judicial error, like so many others she had seen, began to unfold in a way that could not be ignored. Ethan was not the man everyone claimed him to be. With every session, he became more vulnerable, more human. It was as if he had opened a door that, until then, he had been trying to keep locked. Mia started to see in him not just the condemned prisoner, but someone with a story that deserved to be heard. "I'm not the monster people think I am," Ethan said during one of their sessions, his eyes full of pain. "I just did what anyone would do in my place." Mia leaned slightly forward, attentive. "What do you mean by that? What really happened that night?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was filled with emotion. "I was defending my life, Mia. They didn't give me a choice. They accused me, but I was just trying to protect my family." The weight of his words hung in the air, and Mia knew he was starting to open up more than at any previous moment. She felt an urge to believe him, but she also knew that her role was to question, investigate, and understand. However, something inside her resisted. The systems she was trying to challenge were complex, and they were structured in a way that seemed impossible to break. With each passing day, Mia began to question not just Ethan's guilt, but also the integrity of the entire judicial system. Mia could no longer look at Ethan the same way. Each session, every word he shared, deepened the doubt in her mind. If he was telling the truth, it meant that the entire system she had spent years defending was somehow corrupt. The idea of such a severe judicial error was beginning to take shape in a disturbing way. She knew that what she was doing could have serious consequences for her career. She was challenging the authorities in the prison, her superiors, and the very justice system she had once believed to be infallible. But what Mia didn't realize was just how emotionally involved she was becoming. She knew the line between professionalism and personal involvement was becoming increasingly blurred. One morning, Mia met with Marisa to discuss the case. "I truly believe Ethan is telling the truth," she said, without hesitation. "I've read the reports again, and the evidence doesn't add up. Something doesn't make sense here." Marisa looked at her with a concerned expression. "Mia, you need to be careful. I know you want to help, but sometimes the system is more right than we think. They have their reasons for convicting him. But what if they're wrong?" Mia couldn't stop questioning. "What if he's innocent?" Marisa sighed, looking down. "This is more complicated than you think. We're not just dealing with one man's life, Mia. We're dealing with an entire system." Mia felt torn. On one hand, she wanted to believe Ethan. On the other, she knew that questioning the system could be a mistake. But she could no longer ignore the feeling that something was wrong with his case. She made a decision. She would start investigating on her own, without the support of the others. But she knew this meant risking her career, her relationships at work, and even her personal safety. But the search for the truth now seemed like the only thing that mattered. Mia began working behind the scenes, not involving anyone else in her investigation. She knew the prison was watching her every move, but she could no longer ignore the flaws in the system. When she reviewed Ethan's documents again, she found something that caught her attention. A key witness had changed her version of events after the trial. She decided to visit the woman, a friend of Ethan's before he was imprisoned, named Linda. Linda lived in a small town about 2 hours from New York, and Mia hit the road without hesitation. She felt something important was about to be revealed. When Mia arrived at Linda's house, the woman seemed hesitant to speak. "I never wanted to get involved in this," she said, looking distrustfully at Mia. "But the truth needs to be told. They forced me to lie. Ethan was never the kind of man who could commit the crime they accuse him of." Linda explained that, after the trial, she had been intimidated by the authorities to change her testimony. She had been afraid of reprisals, but she knew Ethan's justice needed to be restored. Mia listened carefully, taking quick notes as she tried to grasp the weight of those words. Before leaving, Linda looked directly at Mia. "Be careful, doctor. This is bigger than you think. The system will swallow you whole if you're not careful." Mia knew time was running out. She didn't know who to trust anymore, but she was more determined than ever to find the truth. However, as she delved deeper into the case, the danger became more apparent. Her investigation was drawing attention, and she could already feel that she was being watched. The threats were no longer just a possibility. They were becoming real. The pressure was becoming unbearable. Mia felt the weight of each step she took toward the truth, but she also felt the heat of the pursuit. The threats began to emerge more directly. She received anonymous phone calls and found mysterious notes at her doorstep. Each of these signs pulled her further away from her comfort zone and closer to the fine line between right and wrong. When she finally gathered all the evidence confirming Ethan's innocence, Mia found herself in a deep moral dilemma. The justice system, as flawed as it was, still held its power. Exposing it would not only reveal the corruption but also destroy her career, and possibly her life. She knew that one wrong move could be fatal. Ethan, on the other hand, was desperate for justice. In her last visit, he begged Mia to fight for him, not to give up. "You're the only person I trust, Mia," he said, with teary eyes. "I know I can count on you." Mia found herself in a moment of total uncertainty. The idea of exposing all the corruption she had uncovered seemed like an irreversible path. She knew her life would never be the same. But at the same time, she couldn't let injustice stand, not after everything she had discovered. In the end, Mia made a decision. She would fight, even if it meant paying a high price. She couldn't continue living knowing she was ignoring such a devastating truth. Ethan's justice would also be her own. Mia was aware that what she was about to do could change her life forever. She had decided to reveal everything she had discovered about Ethan's case. She knew it would not only jeopardize her career but also her safety and the safety of everyone around her. But there was no turning back. The truth had to come to light, and she was willing to pay the price for it. After days of preparation, Mia met with an investigative journalist, someone who could help her disclose the information safely. She handed over all the documents and recordings she had gathered. "If you do this the right way, Mia, we can bring down this corrupt system," he told her, with the same seriousness she felt in her heart. The news about the corruption in the prison system started to spread, and soon Mia found herself at the center of a media storm. She was interviewed by various outlets, and the evidence she had gathered began to be analyzed. However, as expected, there was an aggressive reaction from the authorities. The head of the prison, responsible for many of the injustices committed against Ethan, tried to discredit her, saying she was spreading lies. The pressure on Mia increased every day. She began to be isolated at work, with colleagues distant and visibly afraid to associate with her. However, in the midst of the chaos, Mia found the strength to carry on. She knew the only way to change things was to remain steadfast, regardless of the consequences. Her loyalty to the truth and to Ethan was greater than any threat. Meanwhile, Ethan, still in prison, was reviewed by a judge after the new evidence was made public. During the hearing, Ethan's defense attorneys presented the proof of his innocence, and the case was reopened. The judge ordered Ethan's release, and within a few days, he was finally freed from prison, after years of unjust suffering. When Ethan was released, he sought out Mia. They met at a cafe, the place where they had always discussed their hopes and fears. "You did this, Mia," he said, with a smile that reflected the gratitude for all the pain they had endured. "You brought me back to life." Mia looked at him, her eyes shining with a mixture of emotion and relief. She knew it hadn't been an easy fight, but as she looked at Ethan, now free, she knew that the truth, no matter how painful, had prevailed. Mia and Ethan were now out of the reach of the system that had tried to keep them apart. The fight for justice was over, but their future was just beginning. They sat together on a bench in the park, with no rush to speak, allowing the silence between them to communicate what words could not express. "I never knew if this would actually happen, Mia," Ethan said, looking out at the horizon. "I didn't know if the truth would be enough, but you believed in me, and that made all the difference." Mia looked at him, her heart heavy with a mixture of emotions. She had risked everything for him, and somewhere deep in her soul, she knew her love for him had grown into something stronger than she ever imagined. "You deserve more than freedom, Ethan," she replied softly. "You deserve the truth, justice. And more than that, you deserve happiness." Ethan smiled shyly, his eyes locking onto Mia with an intensity he couldn't hide. "I don't know how I'm going to spend the rest of my life, but I know I want to spend the rest of it with you, Mia. You showed me that even in the darkest of times, there's something valuable to be found, something worth fighting for." Mia felt her heart race. She knew the journey that was just beginning wouldn't be easy. They had both faced hell together, and what lay ahead were the remnants of everything they had lived through. But the truth, justice, and above all, love, were now the foundations that bound them together. "I want that too, Ethan," Mia responded, her eyes shining. "I want to live this life by your side. Not because you were wronged, but because you're the person I choose. You showed me strength I never knew I had." The silence between them was broken by a soft, genuine laugh. They knew that, despite everything they had been through, something new and deeper was beginning right there. The pain that had marked them was beginning to fade, making way for something more beautiful, something stronger. Love. And in that moment, with the world around them seeming less threatening, Mia and Ethan finally found peace, not just with the system that had tried to tear them apart, but with each other. They had overcome the impossible, and now, together, they were unstoppable.